She stood there, 8 months pregnant, mascara running down her face as champagne dripped from her hair. The entire room erupted in laughter. Her husband, the man who promised to protect her, just stood there, frozen, while his mother smiled. What happened next would shatter a family's legacy forever and expose a truth so devastating that it would make national headlines. This is the story of Emma Richardson, a 28-year-old teacher from Charleston, South Carolina, whose life was about to change in the most unimaginable way during what should have been the happiest time of her life. It's a story about betrayal, humiliation, and the incredible strength it takes to stand up when everyone expects you to fall. This isn't just about one woman's pain. It's about how far people will go to protect their secrets, and what happens when the truth finally comes to light. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Emma had always been the kind of person who saw the best in people. Growing up in a small town in Georgia, she was raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 7 years old. Her grandmother, Margaret, taught her that kindness was the greatest gift you could give someone, and Emma carried that lesson with her throughout her life. She worked her way through college, became an elementary school teacher, and spent her days helping children who reminded her of herself, kids who needed someone to believe in them. That's where she met Daniel Richardson at a charity fundraiser for underprivileged students in the fall of 2019. He was charming, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in her passion for education. Daniel came from money, old Charleston money, the kind that came with country club memberships, gala invitations, and a family name that opened doors. The Richardsons owned a commercial real estate company that had been in the family for 3 generations. His mother, Catherine Richardson, was a prominent figure in Charleston society, serving on boards of various charities and hosting events that were covered in the local society pages. Their courtship was like something out of a romance novel. Daniel would surprise Emma with flowers at school, take her to quiet restaurants where they could talk for hours, and introduce her to a world she had only seen in movies. 6 months later, he proposed to her on a beach in Kiowa Island, just the two of them at sunset. Emma said yes without hesitation. The engagement, however, was when things began to shift. Catherine Richardson made her feelings known from the very beginning. During their first dinner together as an engaged couple, Catherine looked Emma up and down and said, "Well, I suppose we all marry for different reasons." The comment stung, but Daniel squeezed Emma's hand under the table and later told her his mother just needed time to warm up to the idea. The wedding was a grand affair in June of 2020, despite Emma's preference for something smaller. Catherine insisted on inviting over 300 guests, most of whom Emma had never met. Throughout the planning process, Catherine made subtle digs about Emma's choices. Her dress was too simple, her flower preferences were pedestrian, and her guest list was embarrassingly short. Daniel always defended his mother, saying she just wanted everything to be perfect. Emma learned to smile through it, to choose her battles, to remind herself that she was marrying Daniel, not his family. The first year of marriage was mostly happy. They lived in a beautiful townhouse in downtown Charleston that Daniel's family had given them as a wedding gift. Emma continued teaching, despite Catherine's repeated suggestions that it wasn't necessary for her to work. Daniel's career was thriving, and he traveled frequently for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. In the spring of 2023, Emma discovered she was pregnant. She was overjoyed, terrified, and hopeful all at once. When she told Daniel, he cried happy tears and immediately started planning, talking about nurseries and baby names. When they told Catherine, her response was measured. "Well, I suppose this was inevitable," she said, sipping her tea. "I do hope you plan to take maternity leave and focus on the baby. A child needs their mother." The pregnancy was relatively smooth until the 6th month, when Emma developed complications that required bed rest. She had to leave her teaching position earlier than planned, which meant spending more time at home, more time alone. Daniel's trips seemed to be getting longer and more frequent. When he was home, he seemed distracted, always on his phone, always with one more work emergency to handle. Emma tried to talk to him about it, but he assured her everything was fine, just a busy season at work. As Christmas approached, Catherine announced that the annual Richardson family Christmas party would be held at their estate on December 23rd. Emma dreaded it. She was 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and feeling more isolated than ever. But Daniel insisted they attend. "It's important to my mother," he said. "And it's important to me that you're there." So Emma bought a new maternity dress, navy blue and elegant, and told herself it would only be a few hours. The Richardson estate was transformed into a winter wonderland when Emma and Daniel arrived on that cold December evening. White lights twinkled from every surface, a massive Christmas tree dominated the grand foyer, and waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Emma felt out of place immediately. The other women were dressed in designer gowns, dripping with jewelry, their hair and makeup professionally done. Daniel left her side almost immediately, pulled away by business associates who wanted to discuss a potential deal. Emma stood awkwardly by the fireplace, nursing a glass of sparkling water, trying to appear comfortable in a room full of strangers who barely acknowledged her presence. Catherine was holding court in the main living room, surrounded by admirers, looking stunning in a red silk gown. After about an hour, Emma needed to use the bathroom. As she washed her hands upstairs, she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized Catherine's voice immediately, sharp and clear. "I still cannot believe Daniel went through with marrying her," Catherine was saying. A schoolteacher with no family, no connections, nothing to offer except her youth and apparently her fertility. Another woman laughed. "Well, you know how men are. They see a pretty face and forget everything their mothers taught them." Emma's hands froze on the towel. "The worst part is that now she's pregnant," Catherine continued. "There's no getting rid of her now. She'll be attached to this family forever, bleeding us dry with her middle-class sensibilities and her complete lack of understanding about how things work in our world." Emma felt tears stinging her eyes. She had known Catherine didn't like her, but hearing it spoken so plainly, with such venom, was devastating. She waited until the voices faded before emerging, her heart pounding. She made her way back downstairs, searching for Daniel. She finally spotted him near the bar, laughing with a group of men. As she approached, she noticed he was standing very close to a woman she didn't recognize, a stunning blonde in a silver dress. The woman touched Daniel's arm, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. He laughed, that intimate laugh Emma thought was reserved for her. Emma's stomach dropped. As she got closer, she heard fragments of conversation. "You always were terrible at keeping secrets, Danny," the blonde woman was saying, her hand still on his arm. That's when Catherine's voice rang out across the room, amplified by the sudden quiet that seemed to settle over the party. "Everyone, if I could have your attention please." The crowd turned toward her. Catherine stood on a small platform, a microphone in her hand and a smile on her face that Emma would never forget. "Thank you all for coming to our annual Christmas celebration," Catherine began. "This year has been particularly interesting for our family. My son Daniel has given me many surprises, some more welcome than others." There was a ripple of laughter from the crowd. "But there's one surprise in particular that I think deserves recognition tonight. Emma, dear, could you come up here please?" Every eye in the room turned to Emma. Her heart was racing. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the air, see it in Catherine's eyes. Emma's legs felt like lead as she walked through the crowd toward the platform. Catherine extended a hand to help her up the step, her grip surprisingly tight. "Many of you have met my daughter-in-law Emma," Catherine announced, her arm around Emma's shoulders. "She's been part of our family for a few years now, and as you can see, she's about to make me a grandmother." There was polite applause. "Emma comes from very humble beginnings," Catherine continued, and Emma's stomach clenched. "She worked so hard to better herself, to rise above her circumstances. It's really quite admirable, isn't it? Which is why what I'm about to share makes this situation so particularly tragic. You see, about 6 months ago, right around the time Emma discovered she was pregnant, something interesting came to my attention. Catherine pulled out her phone, and suddenly the large television screen mounted on the wall behind them flickered to life. Emma turned to look, and her blood ran cold. It was photographs of her from college, just kids at parties, nothing scandalous, but the way Catherine had framed them made them look sordid. "This is Emma at what appears to be quite the party," Catherine announced. The screen changed again, showing financial records, bank statements that Emma didn't recognize. "I did some digging, as any concerned mother would, and I discovered that our dear Emma here has been hiding quite a bit of debt. Student loans, credit cards, personal loans, almost $120,000 worth." Emma's mind reeled. Yes, she had student loans, but $120,000? That wasn't right. "Imagine my surprise," Catherine said, "when I realized that this debt seemed to coincide exactly with my son's increasing generosity. Money disappearing from accounts, expensive purchases, all while Emma claimed to be so independent, so self-sufficient. I'm not saying she got pregnant on purpose, but I am saying that timing is interesting, isn't it? A struggling schoolteacher with mountains of debt suddenly carrying the heir to the Richardson fortune." The room was completely silent now. Emma could feel everyone's eyes on her, could feel the judgment, the disgust. "I know, dear. I'm sure you have explanations. You people always do. You people." The words hung in the air like poison. Emma looked out at the crowd, searching for Daniel, needing him to defend her, to explain, to stop this nightmare. She found him standing near the back, his face pale, but he wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything. "So here's what I propose," Catherine said. "I think it's best if Emma takes some time to reflect on her choices. Perhaps she needs to understand that this family, our legacy, our name, is not something that can be bought or tricked into." Before Emma could process what was happening, Catherine picked up a glass of champagne from a nearby tray. "To honesty," Catherine said, raising the glass. And then, with a smile that would haunt Emma's nightmares, she threw the champagne directly in Emma's face. The cold liquid hit her like a slap, soaking her hair, her dress, running down her face and mixing with her tears. The room gasped, but it quickly turned into laughter, nervous at first, then louder, more confident. Emma stood there, 8 months pregnant, dripping with champagne, while the entire room laughed at her. She looked at Daniel again. He was staring at the floor. "Security will show you out," Catherine said calmly. "I don't think you're quite suited for this family after all." 2 security guards appeared at Emma's sides, each taking an arm. "No, wait, please," Emma begged. "Daniel, please, say something." But Daniel didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there while the security guards led his pregnant wife toward the door. As they pushed her out into the cold December night, Emma heard Catherine's voice one more time. "Now, where were we? Ah yes, let's get this party back on track." The door slammed shut behind her, and Emma collapsed on the front steps, her body shaking with sobs, one hand on her swollen belly, completely and utterly alone. Emma sat on those cold stone steps for what felt like hours. Her dress was still wet, clinging uncomfortably to her skin, and the December wind cut through her like knives. She didn't have her phone, it was in her purse inside. She didn't have her coat. The valet who had parked their car earlier approached her cautiously. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" Emma tried to speak, but only a sob came out. The young man, who couldn't have been more than 22, sat down beside her. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "And I'm really sorry for what happened in there. That wasn't right." After a few minutes, she managed to ask if she could borrow his phone. She called the only person she could think of, her best friend Sarah, who she'd known since college. Sarah arrived within 30 minutes, wrapped Emma in the warmest hug, and said, "Let's get you out of here." As they drove away, Emma looked back at the Richardson estate, all lit up and beautiful. Somewhere in there was her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, who had stood by and watched while his mother destroyed her. Sarah took Emma back to her apartment and gave her warm clothes and hot tea. When Emma finally told her everything, Sarah's face went from sympathetic to furious. "Emma, you have to know that none of what she said was true, right? Your student loans weren't a secret. And $120,000. That's not even close to what you owe." That night, as Emma lay in Sarah's guest bed, her phone started ringing. It was Daniel. She stared at the screen, then sent it to voicemail. He called 17 more times that night. Each time, she let it ring. In the morning, there were dozens of texts. "Emma, please call me. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to do that. Please, we need to talk. Think about the baby." That last one made her furious. Now he wanted to think about the baby. Sarah made her breakfast and sat with her. "You need to talk to a lawyer," Sarah said firmly. "What Catherine did last night, that was assault. And slander. You can't just let them get away with this." Emma knew Sarah was right, but the thought of fighting the Richardson family felt overwhelming. She was 8 months pregnant, emotionally devastated, and financially dependent on Daniel. Around noon, there was a knock on Sarah's door. Sarah looked through the peephole and turned back with a confused expression. It's a woman. Older, really well dressed. Says her name is Margaret Winters. Emma didn't recognize the name, but Sarah let the woman in. Margaret Winters was probably in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. "Emma," she said gently. "I was at the party last night, and what I witnessed was unconscionable. I couldn't sleep knowing I didn't do anything to help you." Margaret sat down and explained that she was a retired family law attorney who had known the Richardson family for years. "Catherine is a difficult woman," Margaret said carefully. "What she did to you last night was calculated and cruel, and I think you need to understand something important." She pulled out a folder from her purse. "I've been concerned about Catherine's influence over Daniel for years. After last night, I did some digging through public records. Emma, those debt numbers Catherine showed? They were fabricated. Altered bank statements. Complete lies." Emma felt her breath catch. "But why? Why would she do that?" Margaret's expression was sad. "Because she's losing control. Daniel marrying you was the first real decision he ever made without her approval. The baby represents a permanent tie to you. Catherine needed to destroy you in front of everyone who matters in that social circle so that when she convinces Daniel to divorce you, everyone will believe it was justified." The calculation of it made Emma feel sick. "But there's something else," Margaret continued. "I found some interesting financial transfers from Catherine's personal accounts to an account belonging to a woman named Victoria Ashford. Does that name mean anything to you?" Emma shook her head, but then she remembered the blonde woman at the party. "I saw Daniel with a blonde woman last night," Emma said quietly. "They seemed close." Margaret nodded. "Victoria Ashford is the daughter of one of Catherine's oldest friends. She and Daniel dated years ago, before he met you. From what I can tell, Catherine has been paying Victoria's rent for the past 6 months, and Victoria has been spending a lot of time with Daniel when he's supposedly traveling for work." The betrayal hit Emma like a physical blow. All those business trips, all those late nights. He had been cheating on her. While she was pregnant with his child. "I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're up against," Margaret said gently. "But you also need to know that you're not powerless. Catherine made a mistake last night. She did everything in front of witnesses. Her lies can be proven false. Daniel's infidelity can be documented. And with the right legal representation, you can protect yourself and your baby." Emma looked at this stranger who had shown her more kindness in one morning than her husband's entire family had shown her in 3 years. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Margaret smiled sadly. "Because 30 years ago, I was you. Different circumstances, but the same kind of family, the same kind of humiliation. I didn't fight back, and I've regretted it every day since. I don't want that for you. Sarah squeezed Emma's hand. You have options. You're not alone. That afternoon, Emma made a decision. She called Margaret back and said yes, she wanted legal representation. She wanted to fight. Not for revenge, not for money, but for her child. For the baby who deserved better than to grow up watching their mother be treated as worthless. Margaret worked fast. Within 3 days, she had gathered evidence of Catherine's fabrications, documented proof that the financial statements shown at the party were fake, and testimonies from several party guests who had been disturbed by what they witnessed. She also hired a private investigator who quickly confirmed Daniel's affair with Victoria. Photos of them at restaurants, hotels, her apartment. The timeline matched perfectly with Emma's pregnancy. While Margaret built their case, Daniel kept trying to contact Emma. He showed up at Sarah's apartment multiple times, but Sarah refused to let him in. Catherine, meanwhile, launched her own campaign. Within days of the Christmas party, stories started appearing in local society blogs. Anonymous sources claiming Emma had trapped Daniel with the pregnancy, that she had been after the Richardson money all along. Each article felt like another slap. On December 30th, exactly 1 week after the party, Margaret filed a lawsuit against Catherine Richardson for defamation, slander, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also filed for divorce on Emma's behalf, citing adultery and seeking full custody of the unborn child. The news hit Charleston society like a bomb. No one sued the Richardsons. No one challenged Catherine Richardson. But Emma had, and suddenly, everything changed. The Richardson family hired the most expensive legal team in South Carolina. Their strategy was simple: destroy Emma's credibility completely, paint her as a gold digger who had gotten pregnant deliberately. The first hearing was in mid-January, just 2 weeks before Emma's due date. The Richardson lawyers pushed for an expedited schedule, hoping Emma's pregnancy would make her seem desperate and emotional. Emma was terrified. But when she looked at Margaret beside her, calm and prepared, and thought about her baby, she found strength she didn't know she had. The Richardson lawyers came at her hard. They questioned every aspect of her life, her childhood, her education, her finances, her relationship with Daniel. They made her student loans sound like she was drowning in debt. They implied she had been calculating from the moment she met Daniel. Emma answered every question honestly, her voice shaking but steady. Yes, she had student loans, most teachers did. No, she had never hidden them from Daniel. When they brought up the photos from the Christmas party, the fabricated financial statements, Margaret objected immediately. Your Honor, those documents have been proven to be falsified. We have expert testimony from a forensic accountant showing that the numbers were altered, the accounts don't even exist in some cases. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison, wasn't having it. I've reviewed the evidence your team submitted, Judge Morrison said to the Richardson lawyers. And I have to say, I'm troubled by what appears to be a deliberate attempt to mislead not just the court but an entire room full of people. When it was Daniel's turn to testify, Emma felt her heart break all over again. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Under questioning from his own lawyers, Daniel painted a picture of a marriage where he had been generous and loving, while Emma had been increasingly demanding during her pregnancy. Margaret's cross-examination was devastating. Mr. Richardson, you claim your wife hid financial information from you, is that correct? Yes, Daniel said. And yet, you filed joint tax returns for the past 3 years, correct? Returns that would have shown all sources of income and debt. Daniel hesitated. My accountant handles that. So you signed documents without reading them? Or you did read them and you're lying now? The point was made. Then Margaret brought up Victoria Ashford. Mr. Richardson, how long have you been having an affair with Miss Ashford? The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face went pale. We're just friends. Margaret placed a folder on the stand. These are photographs taken over the past 6 months. You and Miss Ashford at the Peninsula Hotel in September. At her apartment in October. At a restaurant in Savannah in November. During a weekend you told your wife you were at a business conference in Atlanta. So I'll ask again, how long have you been having an affair? 5 months, Daniel finally whispered. Since July. Since right after Emma had gotten pregnant. Margaret had one more question. On December 23rd, when your mother threw champagne in your pregnant wife's face and had her forcibly removed from your family home while hundreds of people laughed, what did you do? Daniel didn't answer. Mr. Richardson, what did you do to protect your wife? Nothing, Daniel finally said. I did nothing. When Catherine took the stand, she was confident, poised, completely in control. She denied fabricating any documents, claimed she had hired a reputable private investigator who had provided the information. Margaret presented testimony from the so-called private investigator, who, when questioned separately, admitted that Catherine had provided him with the conclusions she wanted and he had simply created documents to support those conclusions. She showed financial records proving Catherine had been funding Victoria's lifestyle for months. She brought forth witnesses from the Christmas party, including Marcus the valet and 3 guests who testified to the humiliation Emma had endured. One witness, an older gentleman named Robert Chen, testified that he had been so disturbed that he had immediately cut ties with the Richardson family's businesses. But Catherine's biggest mistake came when Margaret asked her about her relationship with her son. Would you say you're protective of Daniel? Of course. He's my only child. And you've always been very involved in his life decisions. I've guided him, yes. In fact, you've controlled most aspects of his life, haven't you? Who he dates, where he works, how he spends his money. Catherine's eyes flashed. I have high standards for my family. Including who he marries. Clearly, I should have had more say in that decision, Catherine said, and then seemed to realize her mistake. Margaret pounced. So when Daniel married Emma against your wishes, you decided to take matters into your own hands. To manufacture evidence that would justify separating them? I did no such thing. You paid a private investigator to create false documents, paid your son's mistress to keep him distracted from his pregnant wife, and then orchestrated a public humiliation designed to destroy Emma's reputation so completely that no one would question when Daniel divorced her. Isn't that true? She was never good enough for him. Catherine's composure finally cracked. She was a nobody, a charity case with nothing to offer except her looks and her ability to get pregnant. I built this family's legacy, and I wasn't going to let some opportunistic little gold digger destroy it. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison slammed her gavel. Order. Mrs. Richardson, you will control yourself or I will hold you in contempt. But the damage was done. Catherine had revealed exactly who she was, and it was all on record. Emma went into labor 3 days later, 2 weeks early but not dangerously so. Sarah rushed her to the hospital, and Margaret met them there. Daniel found out and showed up, but hospital security kept him out of the delivery room. Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl on January 27 at 3:15 in the morning. She named her Grace Margaret Richardson, the first name for the Grace Emma hoped to find in starting over, and the middle name for the woman who had saved her. Holding Grace in her arms for the first time, Emma felt something shift inside her. This tiny person depended on her. This tiny person deserved a mother who was strong, who fought for what was right, who didn't accept being treated as worthless. 3 days before the custody hearing, something unexpected happened. Margaret called Emma, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Emma, you need to come to my office immediately. Something's happened. When Emma arrived, Margaret's office was full of people, lawyers, investigators, and a woman who looked vaguely familiar. Emma, this is Jennifer Harrington, Margaret said. She's an investigative journalist with the Charleston Chronicle. Jennifer stepped forward. Mrs. Richardson, I've been investigating your case since the lawsuit was filed. What started as a society scandal story turned into something much bigger. I've been digging into the Richardson family's business practices, and I've uncovered evidence of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion going back 15 years. Catherine Richardson has been using the family's commercial real estate business as a front for some very illegal activities. Margaret jumped in. Part of Catherine's scheme involved setting up shell companies to hide money. Several of those companies are in Daniel's name. The FBI was already investigating based on Jennifer's tip, but they needed more evidence. With your permission, they'd like to use the financial documents Catherine presented at the Christmas party as part of their case. Her willingness to fabricate evidence in one context suggests a pattern of deception. Emma looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully. If I do this, what happens? Catherine Richardson will likely face federal charges, Margaret said. Daniel might too. The family's business could be seized. It'll be the biggest scandal Charleston society has seen in decades. And what happens to me and Grace? The truth comes out, Jennifer said. Everyone will know that you were the victim, not the villain. Your name will be cleared completely. Emma thought about that moment on the steps, soaking wet, humiliated, alone. She thought about every whispered comment, every judgmental look. And then she looked at Grace again. Yes, she said firmly. Whatever you need from me, you have it. The FBI moved fast. Within 48 hours, they executed search warrants on the Richardson family home and business offices. Catherine and Daniel were both taken in for questioning. The local news was wall-to-wall coverage. Everything came out. The fake financial documents. The affair with Victoria. The illegal business dealings. The pattern of manipulation and control. But the biggest revelation came from Daniel himself. Under pressure from federal investigators, Daniel made a deal. He would testify against his mother in exchange for immunity. And in his testimony, he revealed something that changed everything. The affair with Victoria wasn't new. It had been going on and off, for years, even before he met Emma. Catherine had encouraged it. When Daniel had started dating Emma instead, Catherine had been furious. She had tried everything to break them up. When that didn't work, and Daniel proposed anyway, Catherine came up with a plan. She would wait, let them get married, let Emma get comfortable. And then, when Emma got pregnant, ensuring she was most vulnerable, Catherine would destroy her completely, making it look like Emma's fault so Daniel would have no choice but to divorce her and go back to Victoria. Daniel admitted to all of it. He had known about his mother's plan. He had restarted the affair with Victoria because his mother insisted, because it was easier than fighting her. He had stood by at the Christmas party because he was weak, because he had always been weak when it came to his mother. When Emma heard his testimony, she felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because everyone now knew the truth. Sadness because this was who she had married. The public response was overwhelming. Suddenly, Emma wasn't the gold digger anymore. She was the victim, the brave young teacher who had been targeted by a powerful family and had fought back. People sent letters of support, flowers, donations. The same society pages that had published gossip about her now ran front-page apologies. The guests who had laughed at the Christmas party now claimed they had been horrified. The court hearing was almost anticlimactic. Judge Morrison ruled in Emma's favor on every count. Daniel was granted supervised visitation with Grace. Catherine was ordered to pay significant damages. And the divorce was granted, with Emma receiving a substantial settlement. But money wasn't what mattered to Emma anymore. What mattered was that she had fought, and she had won. Not just in court, but in proving to herself and to her daughter that you don't have to accept being treated as less than you are. 6 months after the Christmas party that changed everything, Emma sat in her new apartment, a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, watching Grace play on a blanket on the floor. She had gone back to work part-time, and her school had welcomed her with open arms. Sarah was still her closest friend. Margaret had become a grandmother figure for Grace, a mentor and friend for Emma. Catherine Richardson was awaiting trial on multiple federal charges. The family business had been dissolved, assets seized. The Richardson name, once synonymous with Charleston elite society, was now associated with scandal and fraud. Daniel had avoided jail time by cooperating with prosecutors, but he had lost almost everything else. His mother refused to speak to him. Victoria had disappeared the moment his money dried up. He saw Grace every other Saturday for 2 hours at a supervised visitation center. Emma didn't hate Daniel anymore. She had moved past hate into something closer to pity. He had been raised by a woman who valued control over love. Maybe now, stripped of everything, he would finally get that chance to be his own person. Emma had learned things about herself too. She had learned that she was stronger than she thought, braver than she believed, more resilient than anyone had given her credit for. She had learned that kindness wasn't weakness, but that kindness without boundaries could be dangerous. And she had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the doorway to the best thing, if you're brave enough to walk through it. Grace started making happy sounds, and Emma smiled, scooping her daughter up and holding her close. This little girl would grow up knowing her worth. She would grow up seeing her mother stand up for herself, fight for what was right, refuse to accept being treated poorly. A few weeks later, Emma received a letter from Daniel, handwritten. She almost threw it away unopened, but something made her keep it. Later that night, she finally opened it. The letter was 6 pages long, and for the first time, Daniel sounded like a real person instead of a performance. He apologized, not with excuses but with genuine remorse. He explained that he had started therapy and was finally beginning to understand how dysfunctional his relationship with his mother had been. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wanted her to know that she had been right about everything, that what happened to her was wrong, and that his failure to protect her was the biggest regret of his life. He ended with a promise that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be the father Grace deserved. Emma read it twice, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday she would be ready to respond. Maybe not. Either way was okay. She had learned that closure was something you gave yourself, not something someone else could give you. Emma started a support group for women who had experienced family abuse or manipulation, particularly women who had been targeted by their in-laws. She partnered with a local domestic violence organization, and Margaret volunteered to provide legal advice. The first meeting had 3 women. By the 6th month, they were averaging 20. Women came and shared stories that echoed Emma's own. They talked about controlling mothers-in-law, partners who chose their families over their wives, financial abuse, public humiliation. Emma shared her story too, not as someone who had it all figured out, but as someone who was still learning, still healing. She told them about the Christmas party, about the champagne, the laughter, the security guards. She told them about the moment she decided to fight, and how that decision had changed everything. As Grace grew older, Emma knew there would be hard conversations. Questions about Daddy, about Grandma Catherine, about why their family looked different. Emma was preparing for those conversations. But for now, Grace was a happy, healthy toddler who loved story time and playgrounds. She was the best thing that had ever happened to Emma, the silver lining in the darkest cloud. Sometimes Emma still thought about that night on the steps, champagne-soaked and alone, 8 months pregnant and more scared than she had ever been. It felt like a lifetime ago. The difference was that woman had been broken. This woman had been broken and had put herself back together. And in the process, she had become someone stronger, someone better, someone more herself than she had ever been. So let me ask you this. What would you have done in Emma's place? When the entire room was laughing, when your husband stood silent, when your world collapsed around you, would you have found the strength to fight? How do you think you would feel watching someone you love betray you like that? And more importantly, when someone shows you who they really are, do you believe them? Emma's story is a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalyst for our greatest transformation. That humiliation can turn into strength. That betrayal can lead to freedom. Where are you watching from? Have you ever experienced something similar? What advice would you give to someone going through what Emma went through? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they're stronger than they think. Thank you for watching, and remember, your story isn't over. No matter what happened yesterday, you get to decide what happens next. Subscribe for more stories that matter, stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. I'll see you in the next one.